Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on the Paralegal Podcast. I'm Staff Sergeant DeLacy Curl. I'm joined by the fabulous Technical Sergeant Juana Schoonmaker. And we're going to talk about a little bit about her career, and then we're specifically going to talk about how she is one of the few enlisted court reporters for the United States Air Force. Thank you for joining us. It's absolutely fantastic to be talking with you.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited that I'm able to do this. So thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're excited that you agreed and to talk to us about your career, where you came from, where you are now, and how you are now excelling as a court reporter. So I've known Tech Sergeant Schoonmaker for a while. I got the privilege to work with her at Fort Meade. She was a fantastic NCOIC of Justice, and she mentored me and guided me for a while. And now she's off in the fabulous Deutschland doing that court reporting. So let's take a step back though, and let's talk about your early career. So where did you join the Air Force?
So I enlisted in Chicago.
All right.
And then I went to basic training, young, wasn't sure what it all was going to be about, but I was excited.
So
And here we are now.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's crazy to be like, how did this happen? How did I get here? So did you join as a paralegal? Did you come in open general and then were assigned paralegal? How did you end up with the 5J job?
So I came in open general. I kind of just, wanted to get out of Chicago and wanted to join the military. I had wanted to join the military right out of high school, but my family said, nope, you can't join. So I delayed that decision a little bit. So when I took that plunge, I really just kind of wanted to get out of, Chicago as soon as possible. And so waiting for a job, right, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to join, came in open general and see what the fate, what was going to be my fate.
That's rolling the dice. I understand. I did the same thing, came in open general like that, and somehow everybody's like, you ended up with paralegal? That's unheard of. That was a prior service job only. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. No. So yeah, I mean, and you came through as a pipeliner probably right around the time they actually made that change, where they started allowing the non-prior service in.
Yeah, I wasn't the first class. I know we were it was fairly new just because they were still trying to figure things out and things like that. But once they kind of, when you pick your job at basic training, I think paralegal was one of the options. I didn't know what it meant. It had like the 1 or 2, 3 sentence kind of description of what the job is. And I put that as my number one, I think. And we had to get interviewed. And then we had to do that typing test, which I was like, well, I'm not a fast typer, but, let's see what happens. And was interviewed. And then I think there was, I think, like 6 or 7 of us that came out of that basic training group and that we became paralegals and then went through 3-level together and then went our separate ways after that.
So do you feel like and this is just something that's interesting right now, I think some of our younger viewers might be able to compare and contrast. How do you feel as a pipeliner for you coming in a time where everybody else in the career field was a prior service? They had retrained out of another career field. Do you feel like there was a bit of a stigma against you initially, where they were like, oh, you're so new, how could you possibly do this job when you need this Air Force experience to do it? Do you feel like that you faced any kind of stigma being a pipeliner at that time?
I don't think it was so much of a stigma. I think it was more of a, at least when I came in, I was the only A1C in my office, right? I think there was a senior airman. He had been in for a while, and the rest were NCOs and officers. And so compared to like my friends in the dorms where they had like friends that they can kind of like talk to at
Mhm.
work and goof around. And I think for me, I think the expectations were different just because of the nature of our work, right? I felt like, um,
Living in the
my
glass
friends would,
house.
yeah, or like my friends would have all these stories of like, the goofy things they would do at work. And, for us, it was just kind of like from the moment you come in, you start doing Article 15s or at the front desk, and, you're like, you're hustling from day one and you're learning the job. And um, I do think that expectation of kind of, you're here to work, you're here to be a paralegal, you're going to learn your job. I think was there where my other friends were learning how to be airmen, right? And I think we were learning how to be a paralegal, how to process certain paperwork, learning the legal lingo, um, and just, doing briefings and things like that, that I think a lot of other career fields don't get to do so young in their career like we do.
That's definitely an interesting concept. It's almost like airmanship by proxy. It's like
Mhm.
we learn what we should be and should do and shouldn't do almost by viewing everybody else in their natural environment in a way, and
Yeah.
we sort of assimilate our experiences that way because we are, in an office with captains and majors who haven't been in nearly as long as your typical captains or majors. So it is interesting how we do sort of assimilate those experiences that way. Um, so how long did you work at the wing level, I guess, before you made your transition out into your first paralegal special duty?
So I think it was after my third assignment because when I was an airman, I was at Beale, and I was kind of like an Article 15 clerk and got introduced to courts. And then after that, I went to Guam where I really dove into like military justice, where, I went from processing Article 15s to then processing my own courts.
Hmm.
Um, and then once I got to Andrews, I did operational law, and then I did my first uh, kind of special duty, which was an SVP. So I would say I was a senior airman going to be a staff sergeant is when I got the opportunity to do something different.
And that's something different. That was when you became an SVP.
I did. Yep. I was the special victims paralegal at Lake and Heath.
How did you enjoy that?
I loved it. I've been very lucky that every job that I've had to learn a new set of skills, kind of a different part of the law. Um, so it was kind of nice to work for people instead of a process, right? Because you had clients
Mm-hmm.
at that point, and you really got to see the people side of kind of the military justice system. It was really interesting.
That's definitely. I mean, and that's a very stark contrast from pushing courts and 15s at a wing, where, as you said, you're pushing processes, and a lot of times you don't see a person really except for a few milestones. So you're pushing all this paper, and it means something very heavy, but a
Right.
lot of times we just sort of disassociate from that. Whereas you were consistently working with clients. And I know definitely from interacting with you, it seems like that was a very major part of your life. Do you feel like that was probably one of the more rewarding aspects of your career thus far?
It definitely was. I think it really made me see how what we do in the legal offices affects people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what delays does to maybe someone who's been the victim of a crime, how that affects them personally, professionally, emotionally. I think, like you said it perfectly. Sometimes when we're processing these courts in the legal office, we're a little disassociated with how it affects people's lives. And I think that was a big eye opener for me, when we're processing these cases or these Article 15s. These people are looking for closure. These people are looking for some sort of outcome. And the better we do our job, within the legal offices, or even just as a special victims paralegal, the better we explain processes to them, their options, their rights, they just they left maybe with not the outcome that they wanted, but at least they were informed and they can make decisions about their life, with that information.
Definitely. So I mean, there's empowerment through that process that you were able to help deliver to your clients. So that's definitely satisfying in and of itself. So then, right, this is about the point in your life right around the time I met you after you were in SVP. You came to the fantastic Fort Meade, to the wonderful NSA Washington campus, where we worked together and you were into IC of Justice for a relatively short time before then you hopped over to Andrews to work at JCE. So what now that, right, completely different field. I can't even
Different.
say that I can't even say that it's like a different ballpark, right? I mean, that's like a different game altogether. So what did you think about that, right? I mean, what was that about, and how did you feel about it?
So it was really interesting to see the operational side of what we do as paralegals and as JAGs, because I think um, it's it's so interesting to see. I think let me back up a little bit. I think we're all so into the military justice side of what being a paralegal and being a JAG is in the Air Force that I think sometimes we forget that there's other aspects of the law that that we process or that we help or that we advise commanders on. And the operational side was very, very interesting because we did civil litigation and then kind of how the environmental aspect is tied within our missions, right? Uh, from mitigation to encroachment issues, to just special operations missions, and just different aspects that I'm like, I didn't even know that we did that as
Mm-hmm.
paralegals, right? How is our maintainers processing, their garbage, affect the Air Force, or even like our firefighters, how they train and things like that. Our special ops, when they conduct their training, how does that affect, um, our Air Force and what are
Mm-hmm.
our responsibilities to our, to regulations, to different laws and different environmental issues? How can we, as an Air Force, make sure that we're doing the right thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of those things where when I started learning about environmental law, it was just sort of mind blowing. They're like, all right, so we brought in a team of 67 scientists to determine how one missile, off this archipelago, like how it's going to affect tidal erosion on this other island. And I was like,
Yep.
that's incredible. It's like, you just don't ever think about those tertiary effects. So I imagine working at JEC really does sort of open your eyes to that operational level. How does it affect the algae ecosystem in a particular location? And you're just like, I never would have considered that. So it
Yeah.
really, yeah.
I didn't even know we had like protected plants within our like bases and things like
Hmm.
that, and how we can't build around those things and how we protect, plants and areas. Like at Andrews, I think we had wetland areas, and so some of those are protected. So what do we have them within our bases? What do we do?
Yeah, so
But
that is super
interesting.
interesting. Yeah, it's super interesting stuff. So this is now where we're starting to get right back into where we are today, which is out of Andrews. That was when you got picked up for court reporting. So let's talk about that. How did you get the job? Right? Did you volunteer for that, just sort of explain a little bit how you came into being a court reporter?
So typically, court reporting jobs are advertised through AMS. And you click the button, you fill out, you provide certain documents, and then it gets reviewed by JAT and AFPC, and then they see if you qualify. But for me, I was kind of voluntold per AFPC, and I don't know how they determine this. I was the most eligible at that time for this particular position. I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't even know I was up for an assignment. I was just got the phone call out of nowhere, saying, "Hey, you've been selected for this, to be a court reporter. But even though you've been selected by AFPC, the JAG Corps still has to vet you, and you have to fill out the application."
Hmm.
And the application was, I had to take a hearing test, which I thought was really interesting. I'm like, why does a court reporter need a hearing test? And then I had to submit letters of recommendation, um, and then just kind of like my EPRs, my PT tests, and things like that.
All right. So, I mean, a pretty straightforward process. In a way, right? It's like probably initially you hear it's like, why does a court reporter need a hearing test? And then you think about it when you've read some of the transcripts that you've read in your life now, you're like, yeah, I understand why a court reporter needs a hearing test, because occasionally you get some really wild language in a transcript and you're like, all right, either somebody went way off the rails or I think my court reporter may have misheard that. Um, so yeah, that's one of those things I could sort of understand how that would be like, well, that's weird at first, and then it makes a little more sense. So you got the job, you flew off over the pond, and now you're in Germany. What kind of training did you receive to prepare you for being a court reporter?
So I went to a 2-week course at the JAG school, which was only for court reporters.
Mm-hmm.
It was put together and taught by other court reporters and our court reporter manager, which is Master Sergeant Jamie Smith at the moment. And so they just put together really from what is a court, all the way to how to use the equipment and how to put transcripts together. Um, you know, it seems like 2 weeks is a long time, but sometimes I feel like that course could be longer just because of all the intricacies that go with all the court reporter equipment that we use,
Mm-hmm.
all the different rules that go into putting together a transcript, and, how to, if should it be summarized, should it be verbatim, there's all these different requirements for different transcripts. So the 2-week course, I feel like could be a little bit longer.
That makes sense. And that's one of those. That's another job where it almost seems like you really could have a lot of upfront technical education on it, because it is so methodical,
Yeah.
compared to maybe even just the initial like 5J pipeline, right? Where it's like, all right, this is great. This is all. There's a lot of theory here, but you don't. It doesn't click until you do it in a legal office and you see how
Right.
the context really affects each of those events. So I could definitely see why you would say that you want to possibly have a longer initial course. So you brought up equipment, which is pretty awesome, because I think we have staged a little show and tell for you.
For sure do.
So would you mind showing us some of the equipment that you use in your day to day, and just sort of give us a brief overview of what it is and what it does?
Of course. So, as paralegals, we've all been in a courtroom, and we've all kind of seen the little area where the court reporter sits. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but there's always been some sort of like black, like machine with lights on it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I had no idea what that was. I knew the court reporter used it, but I didn't know what it did. And so when you go to most courtrooms have what we call a mixer,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that is one of the most important pieces of equipment that we own. I have one here. This is not the same one that is in most courtrooms, but it's pretty much the same thing, right? So this one is the Motu, and the ones in the courtrooms are DMX 8s. But it's pretty much the same concept where you put in the microphones attached in the back, and you have the buttons in the front that help you kind of uh, adjust the sound, the volume, and things like that. But uh, each kind of like little where you connect it, like maybe this will be for the military judge, this will
Hmm.
be for the defense counsel, and then you can adjust the volume and the sound for each microphone within the courtroom. But these are really cool. I was really scared about how these worked, but they're super easy. It's pretty much plug and play, which is kind of cool, as court reporters when we travel to the different courts. It's really nice that, as an Air Force, we pretty much use the same equipment everywhere,
Hmm.
any courtroom that you go to. Um, but then we also have our court reporter laptops, which are super important because these probably will never be on the network just because of the programs that we
Hmm.
have that connect to the mixers to help us record the audio in the courtroom. Um, and so it's really cool that we have those programs within these laptops. And I think they're gamer computers, the
They are,
ones.
yeah. They're so that's something that JAS actually we purchase those centrally, with in conjunction with like JAT, and we send them out because you are doing things that are far more like processor intensive than your traditional office worker. So you're running that mixer and you're running all of these devices into your computer. It's got to sort through all of that data. It's got to convert analog to digital, and then you've got
Yep.
to be able to take all of that on the back end and put it into a file. So yeah, that compress it. So yeah, what you do, you are running probably like a Republic of Gamers RGB lit keyboard. So you got the rainbow keyboard going on and all that, and so yeah, it's you have a far better setup than most people.
Yes, and I was surprised by how heavy they were, like the
Mm.
laptops. We have two of them and they're just super heavy, but yeah, it's like a love-hate relationship, right? They help me do my job, but then I have to lug them around everywhere I go. But usually the laptop is kind of what we as court reporters use. We this is what's going to go with me to every court.
Yeah.
It's going to be my court reporter equipment, and each court reporter has their own court reporter kind of laptop. And so that's what we attach to the mixers. And these laptops have the programs that we need in order to record and transcribe because they're two different programs. The program to record is called FTR for the record, and that helps us record the audio, kind of take notes during court um, with the audio, kind of like do like the different timestamps of arraignment, peer inquiry, findings, things like that that we can timestamp. Um, so that when we're transcribing or when someone wants to listen a portion of the audio, we can easily, locate that
Mm.
part of the audio. And then the other program within our laptops is called Dragon, and that's what helps us transcribe, which takes me to my other kind of show and tell equipment, and that's our court reporter mask. We're not, we're audio kind of court reporters where we speak into this mask and then we use the program Dragon to kind of help us transcribe, what is being said in court
Mm.
onto a Word document and, kind of what the legal offices get, the transcript. But the cool thing about this is you have to train your dragon using this
Hmm.
mask.
So I was about
And
to ask you about that. How because I have trained Dragon before for personal use, and it takes hours and hours and hours to get it right because it's got to learn your specific like idiosyncrasies to your voice. So how long did it take you to train your Dragon?
oh, I'm still training it, and I've been in the job since June. But one thing to kind of keep in mind is that, so for me, one of the biggest fears that I had before becoming a court reporter was English is not my first language. And so, I'm not very strong in grammar. I'm not, sometimes I get a little caught up with my words. we're like, I think in Spanish, but then I have to talk in English. So that was one of my fears, right? So, I was just really scared about how English being my second language, how that would affect me being a court reporter, if it was going to cause any challenges. But one of the challenges that it did cause was when I was training my dragon to kind of get used to my voice, it wasn't picking up a lot of what I was doing.
Hmm.
So like I would say the word judges and it'll transcribe churches, so just really odd. But then the more I use it, the more it gets kind of used to my voice and the way I say things.
Hmm.
If I'm tired, it'll affect how it's picking up what I'm saying. Um, you know, the way I'm saying things, the tone. It's really weird, but the more I use it, the better it gets. And I think what a lot of people don't know is with every single case that you have, you're going to have to train it with maybe different names that you're going to
Hmm.
use, different witnesses or maybe different medical terminology
Hmm.
or different case law. That's why it's so important for kind of like legal offices to provide us with that information ahead of time so that we can, spend a little bit of time before the court training our dragon to pick up the name of a certain witness or a certain drug or a certain town where a crime took place. Especially here in Europe when I travel, there's all these different names, of different places where people are committing these crimes. So if I train it ahead of time, that'll help me when I go to transcribe.
Hmm.
I can use a code. So a lot of what our transcribing does is we use different codes. So when I say the word Big Mac, it'll type in, M, capital J, colon, semicolon, and that'll be for my military judge. And so when they're having those back and forth, I can just Big Mac, this Article 39 session is called to order, all parties present, blah, blah, blah. ACMAC, that'll be the accused. So each person within the court has their own different code. And all court reporters use different codes and different kind of commands for their dragon to help them transcribe faster.
That is incredibly interesting, and that is absolutely hilarious that the judge is Big Mac.
Well, that's what I see. I don't know what other people use, but yeah, and it's just if you can see, you just kind of gently. It has little air holes on the bottom,
Mm.
but you just gently hold it against your face. Um, we do have kind of like stands, so when we're transcribing, they attach to our chair or to the desk,
Hmm.
so that way you don't have to hold it and you can type or you can be doing something else while you're transcribing.
Okay.
But and I've seen some court reporters for like our civilian court reporters that have like goatees. I've seen them use um, different masks.
Mm.
So it takes some getting used to, but it does make our job in transcribing a lot easier.
Yeah, that is super interesting. The equipment, the skill set that you're learning, which is far outside the normal realm of paralegal skills. You could be a DJ by the time you get done with this. Essentially,
Yeah.
you may not be producing your own music, but you could easily set up all of that equipment and run it.
Yep.
So it's pretty
Yeah.
nifty.
Especially when we're like troubleshooting the equipment when we're in court, where maybe something isn't working right, or we can't catch certain audio. You, the more you do this job, the more tricks you kind of learn. And
Mm.
I'm so glad to have other court reporters to be able to turn back to and say, "Hey, I'm not getting the right timestamp on on my player. What do I do?" Um, but yeah, it's interesting to learn how to work all those audio and equipment. But those are kind of like the three kind of biggest equipment that we have. like our most important equipment, which is the laptop, the mixer, the mask. But then kind of like our once we're transcribing, our headphones and our foot pedal are our next kind of like other types of equipment. Um, the foot pedal just kind of like helps us start and stop the
Mm-hmm.
audio when we're transcribing. It makes such a big difference. I think one day I tried to transcribe without it, and it was impossible to be able to click the audio to stop and
Yeah,
start the.
it is
Uh,
nightmarish.
so this thing is really cool when we're transcribing. It just really helps with that. And of course, um, one of the first pieces of equipment that I actually bought with my own money, the Jackport does provide us with really good headphones, but I was recommended to kind of get other headphones,
Mm-hmm.
just especially with me, with like my accent, and things like that, with having problems with Dragon, not kind of catching my words. I ended up buying gamer headphones,
So you've
and
got the whole gamer setup.
yeah, and I just got these from the BX, and they work great, where they cancel
Mhm.
out any other noise when I'm transcribing. I think one day I was transcribing, and I took off the headphones to take a little break. And I was like, oh, there's like Oktoberfest outside my office right now. I didn't even realize. So that makes a big difference with being able to
Mhm.
catch maybe a witness that's speaking too low, even though you can isolate that person, within the audio. But this just makes such a big difference. And I'm able to have, not many inaudibles within the transcript.
Oh yeah, that makes a huge difference. Yeah, a
Mhm.
good pair of headphones, life changing.
Yeah.
So how steep do you feel like the learning curve was? Right, I mean, you didn't have any prior court reporting experience, prior to getting the job. So how steep do you feel like that curve was to really become proficient at your job?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think core reporting is one of those jobs that I was really scared to do because I didn't know what it entailed. I know when I was receiving the training, right, it was like, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this? Right? They were talking about all these equipment and all this stuff. And so I think learning the equipment was probably the hardest for me because I'm not like a technical person. So I think that was hard for me. I think the learning how to, you know, uh, do the transcripts and kind of what is and the marking exhibits. We as paralegals, we have a little bit of background on what how to mark exhibits, the proceedings of a court, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've all, for the most part, have seen transcripts and put together rots and kind of know what it looks like. Um, but I think the learning the equipment was the hardest um, for me. Everything else, you have the background knowledge of it. You're going to be able to do it. You'll learn. There's AFIs, there's checklists. There's other court reporters so you can ask questions to. Once I got to do it, it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. But there's still so much that I still have to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because every case is different. And so it's kind of like, oh, this didn't happen at the last court. How do I, put in about the Laudenberg Amendment, on the
Mm-hmm.
summarized transcript? How do I make sure that that's entered correctly within or summarized correctly within the transcript?
So with the summarized transcripts, right? I don't know that anybody's ever walked me through that. How do you make that decision as a court reporter? What is and is not relevant, right? I imagine, you make the recording, you do your take on what summarize means, and you provide the recording and the transcript to the counsels and the judge, and then they might have input on that. Am I on the right track there, or what is your code to allow you to create your initial draft of a summarized transcript?
Yeah, well, a court reporter is a keeper of the record, right? Like we have to make sure that we keep track of everything that is going on within a hearing. And so there are two types of transcripts. There's verbatim, when you literally type word for word
Hmm.
everything that was said, everything that happened. And then you have your summarized transcripts, which you kind of just put what happened, but not into as much detail. And whether it's a verbatim or a summarized transcript, that's based on the sentence,
Hmm.
or if it's requested. Um, I personally prefer verbatim because I'm fairly new. And so trying to decide what to summarize or how to summarize it is very subjective, right? You have your different kind of portions of the court. Um, but it's kind of like, okay, well, this witness, testified to all these things, right? They said all these things within a 1 minute sentence. How do I summarize all that? Um, for me personally, I tend to put in, I think, more since I'm a fairly new paralegal, and or a new court reporter. I'm still kind of like learning, you know, what has to be in there.
Hmm.
For example, like findings has to be verbatim no matter what, right?
Hmm.
Um, but then kind of if a witness is testifying, what do you put in there? And I take it, I guess what I've been doing, I don't know how other court reporters do it, is I kind of listen to small portions of the audio, so a few seconds at a time. And then I just kind of summarize that. I try to condense that into, maybe one or two sentences. And I have to listen to it a couple of times, to make sure that I'm not missing something super important. But once we're done, kind of like summarizing it, then the counsel will, both the prosecution and the defense will get a chance to kind of review what you wrote, and that's fantastic because they can add something, they can take away. But whenever they suggest something, I do always rehear the audio, to make sure that you know it, the message of what is being said isn't
Hmm.
changed, that the message is still exactly the same. I'm not adding to it and I'm not taking away from it. Um, I don't think there's really a right or wrong as long as we're, uh, kind of summarizing the best way that we can, right?
Right. Like
I think,
accurately reflecting the record and not putting a spin
yeah.
on it. Because I was actually just thinking about that, right? As you said that, counsel wanting to add things, possibly take things away based on what they deem important. And now, given your prior experience, being on the prosecution side, working for the SVP, do you feel like sometimes counsel might be trying to spin an argument for like the appellate side, and maybe whenever they do give you those edits, it's like, so you're doing a summarized, and maybe defense is like, oh no, this isn't particularly relevant, in the record, or the prosecution wants even more because they feel like it might help later down the line.
No, not at all. I think just different things are important to different parties within the court. But the best part about being a court reporter is that I'm a neutral party,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm there to record and report. And so I think our JAGs, are really good about being ethical and making
Mm-hmm.
those decisions. I think just different things are important to different parties within the court. But luckily, I have that audio that I can always go back,
Mm-hmm.
to listen to make sure that, that's what was or wasn't said. And then at the end of the day, it's my transcript, so I'm going to make that decision, about if I'm going to take their suggestion or not. But Yeah, I think sometimes they may, want certain things in there, and the audio is just my saving grace.
Got it. Yeah, I mean the record is the record, so
Yep.
that makes sense. How do you feel like your workload now compares to being like at the wing, right, where a majority of our paralegals are? How do you feel like that workload compares?
Um, so I think it's it's busy, and I think a lot of the work that we do, um, let me see, how can I say it? We, as a court reporter, we're working for legal offices, right? We're helping them process a case by providing them with a transcript. And so we have certain timelines and certain metrics that we as court reporters have to meet. And then there are metrics that the legal office has to meet with like the Moreno date and things like that, and providing, you know, ROTs and things to accused and victims. So I think we kind of feel the same pressures, as a court reporter when we're processing these transcripts, because of those metrics, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to be the reason that a legal office is bust a Moreno date. And at the end of the day, it's someone's life, that's kind of that's on the line there, right? Uh, this transcript a lot of times is kind of one of the final steps of our military justice system, before the appellate, the post-trial stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of starts. But the cool thing is that if you got to think about it, for every hour of audio, that is probably like a full day of transcribing for me, 5 to 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't sat in like a 2 week court yet, but you have court reporters that have 2 weeks worth of audio, and sometimes that's 6 hours per day. Um, so that there is a lot of transcribing, after the court. So if you have one day of audio, 6 hours of audio, that should take you about 6 hours or 6 days to transcribe. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's new like me, not only am I transcribing, but then I also need time to edit on the back end. Um, so I always let my legal offices know that I'm probably going to need 6 days to transcribe and then 6 days to edit. So that way I can give them the best product possible. But I think that's the only kind of pressures that I
Mm-hmm.
think we feel that are the same as when you're at a wing legal office. Other than that, I mean, being in court, we travel a lot, as enlisted court reporters, where we're a little bit different than the civilian court reporters, where we have an area of responsibility, different legal offices, and we go to all the different ones. So the travel time, I think, that takes a lot of time away from transcribing, doing personal things. You have a doctor's appointment. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
you have court that day. Um, but other than that, I mean, you kind of, you're in charge of your own schedule. You know, Even though I'm in the office with two judges and myself, they kind of have their things to do, and I know what I have to do. So I don't feel that, like, want to say, where you're juggling a million things
Mm-hmm.
in the wing legal office. Here it's very defined of what it is that I'm doing, or what I have to do, where I court, and then I know I have my transcript, that I have to type out. So it's not um, as crazy.
Right.
you know, you
Like the
you
the
can have,
scope.
yeah, you can have courts back to back, where that might kind of, you know, you might have a big workload where you're just finished one court, you can't start transcribing that court right away because
Mm-hmm.
you're headed to another court. But we do have something that's called transcription assistance, whereas court reporters, we can request other court reporters who maybe aren't as busy help us transcribe the audio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so. I feel like probably the scope of the work is a little more narrowly defined versus at the wing legal office, right? You might be doing an Article
Yeah.
15, then working a referral package in the morning, and then all of a sudden you get 6 phone calls about private orgs, and you're
And then you have
trying
to go do a briefing.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and you got to do the briefings, so it seems like the scope is a little more narrowly defined,
Yeah.
and day to day what you're going to be doing. It's you're going to be court reporting.
Yep. You're either going to be in court or you're going to be transcribing.
So, and finally, I just sort of want to touch on what do you think the most satisfying aspect of the job is for you?
I really enjoy the traveling. I was really scared about that. I have 3 kids. My husband's military as well, and so I didn't know how that was going to look for me. Um, you know, who's going to take care of my kids, who's going to take care of the home. But I think it's really satisfying to see how different legal offices, process things. Interacting with different legal offices is really interesting to me. Being at different places is really interesting. And just seeing the justice system as a neutral party, right? Just that is, how can I say it? It's very cool, I guess, to just be able to be there and not be invested in providing a good transcript, but not really having
Invested
a
in the
say.
outcome, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. I really enjoy it. I really like it. I was terrified to do this job. I didn't think I was going to be good at it. I didn't know what it was going to entail. But I can say this is probably like my favorite job to date. It's just, you get to like travel, you get to interact with different legal offices, and you get to learn a whole new set of skills that I think you wouldn't learn being at the legal office.
Yeah, it sounds like, honestly, it sounds like a pretty great gig. So just to close, right? I put you on the spot a little bit. What is something that Technical Sergeant Juana Schoonmaker would have told A1C Schoonmaker? If you could tell yourself something, what would it be?
Read your AFIs and follow those checklists. I think a lot of what we do is a process, and there are answers out there to everything that we do. And I think I was always so scared to mess up, right? Like I was terrified, or how do I process this court, But our AFIs are there, our checklists are there. Our job is hard, in the where we're processing something that has a lot of you have to pay attention to detail, but our job isn't hard because there's answers to things and processes and how to do them.
Yeah, that's as one of my previous supervisors used to say, "Did you look it up?" He would hit me with that before I could even get the words out of my mouth. So that is a fantastic sentiment right there. It's in the AFI. So I just wanted to, thank you again for taking the time to do this interview with me and to really shed some light on what it looks like to be one of the few enlisted court reporters in the United States Air Force. So again, everyone, thank you for watching. Thank you to Technical Sergeant Juana Schoonmaker for taking the time out to talk to us, and we will see you next time.